Thank you for joining us and welcome back to another episode of the Mills Knows Bills podcast. I'm your host as well as CEO and founder of MKB, Mills Bender. And today is part 2 with Dan Workman. If you missed last week's episode where we were talking about all things car wraps and the ROI on them and just learning more about his story, you missed out. Pause this episode, go back, listen to that one, and then you can join us for this one after. All right? I promise it'll still be here. But with that said, Dan, thank you for coming back. I'm excited for our part 2 today.
Me too. Thank you, Mills. Much appreciated.
I'm excited to have you.
Ask you some questions now.
Yes. You know, the floor is all yours. So what can I answer for you today?
Okay. So you deal with, you deal with a lot of blue collar business owners,
yeah.
Right? So what are some of the most common challenges that you observe that they have with their bills? Their numbers?
I would say this is actually, so about 60% of our portfolio right now is blue collar. The other 40% is white collar. And regardless of the industry or the type of business, the size of the business, how much revenue they make, they all struggle with the same thing, cash flow. And the reason being, it's this concept that a lot of people hear of, but they don't actually understand what it means or how to manage it. And so what we like to do is project their cash flow over the course of 13 weeks. And then the first thing we'll do is identify gaps. So if they're going to go under or even under their buffer / threshold amount, we can then see in the future when that's going to happen. So we can start making decisions today to fix that issue. But I think my favorite part is more on a proactive rather than reactive basis. Rather than fixing issues that we see, it's saying, okay, at this point in our cash flow, we can then make these operational decisions. We can hire that new person. We can buy that new piece of equipment. We can expand into that secondary location. And so it's this matter of making sure that the business has more money coming in at any given point than it does coming out. And it's a concept that is simple, but not always easy for the business owner to implement. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For sure. So if a business is, they're some months they're in the red, some months they're in the black.
Mm-hmm.
How would you guide them into making financial decisions like that with managing cash flow and not panicking that they're in the negative in those months?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is look at the profit and loss statement on a month over month basis and see where you are typically not performing well. You just have seasonality, right? And if you can see that your seasonality is going to come in the summer months, but right now you're in your busier months, you need to set aside extra cash while you have it to prepare for the slower months. While also making sure if your finances are really strong right now, apply for that line of credit while you're going to qualify a lot better and easier than you would when you actually need the money. And so it's a matter of looking ahead and saying, I'm going to prepare for that rainy day, but I'm going to more than just prepare for it to survive. I know that all of my competitors are going to have that same seasonality that I do. And so while they are not financially preparing for it, I will, and I'm going to make all of my operational changes during those slower months. So for example, I'll use myself. Q4 is historically slow for me. It just is. Because everybody is saying, this year I didn't hit my goals. I'm going to wait until the new year. I'm going to hit my New Year's resolutions next year. And so stack on top of that all the holidays, we're just slow. I know we're slow. And you know what I do? I say, I'm going to make all my new hires during that time frame. And I'm going to be able to financially afford it because the months prior, I set aside the extra cash to keep us afloat when we need to make those new hires. And we're not going to see the additional revenue coming in from it. But if I have then the slower time frame, I'm not as busy in my business, that means I have the time and capacity to properly train them. So by the time we get into our busy season, I'm not trying to decide whether to train somebody or to service clients. They're ready to hit the ground running. It's also the time frame that we'll use to switch over softwares or start implementing a new system or process, because when you're dealing with it and you have the time to actually implement it properly, then it's not being done poorly. So during those slower seasons, we're going to be picking up our competitors' team members that they can no longer afford and had to fire because they did not financially prepare. We're going to double down on our marketing because our competitors didn't have the money set aside to continue marketing, but we do. So by the time people are ready to buy again, they're going to keep us at the top of their mind because we were in front of them, right? You said it's not necessarily the best, it's the best known. In the last episode, that's our version of the best known, right? So it's a matter of being strategic in not just the financial decisions, but the operational decisions, making sure that you can afford those operational decisions regardless of where you're at in your seasonality.
That's brilliant. And that's great advice for myself even. Because we also have seasonal,
every business does.
And we get a little slow.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Another question for you.
Sure.
Are there any, we'll call them limiting beliefs that business owners have on how to use certain types of, like you said, line of credit or credit cards? Do you work with people ever or see people that are like, no, I don't want to get in debt of anything. I'm just going to bootstrap it all. And where do you see a benefit to being more risky with other things like if they're going to, how do you break them out of that limiting belief?
So typically if somebody has a limiting belief around debt, it's because of how debt was used in their upbringing. So this is kind of where we're a little bit of financial therapists, but we'll talk about, well, why are you so risk averse or debt averse? Was it because growing up, your parents always talked about how debt was bad? Or maybe you grew up in a household where the 2008 market crash happened, and because your parents were over leveraged, you lost everything. Like, we kind of get to that root problem a little bit. But then we talk about how debt, when used properly, is not liability, it's actually leverage. And so a line of credit, you don't actually have to use that money if you apply for it. You just need it readily available. And you're actually doing yourself a favor by applying for a line of credit when you don't need one, because you're going to get much more favorable repayment terms and interest rates. Whereas if you need the money, it's going to cost you a lot more. And so if you're able to just have it as a backup, knowing that that can operate as part of your emergency fund while you still build up your emergency fund, or you want to step into some immense growth periods over the next year or so, you have that money to help you get there. The second thing I would say is make sure that you're not just using that money to cover payroll or your normal operating expenses. Your operating cash flow, your operating revenue should cover your operating expenses. Anytime you get debt, it should really only be to help you invest in an area that you're not already investing in your business. So it could be for a new hire. It could be for a new piece of equipment. It could be for marketing spend. But either way, it should be for something that is new in your business, and you have a timeline on when you want to receive a return on that investment. And it should be more than what you're paying into the business for that debt. Otherwise, it's just going to be liability. The third thing that I use as a financial metric is you can check on your solvency to see if you're over leveraged. Solvency is really just your ability to repay debt. There's a variety of different ratios that you can use, but the simplest one is taking your profit and dividing it by debt. Yeah, profit and dividing it by your debt balance. So if, for example, you want, you look at your last month's profit and loss, you want to take your bottom line number, net income, profit, whatever it is, that's your numerator. and then divide it by the total balances of all your debt. So if you have a credit limit of $100,000, but you've only used $50,000, you're only going to put $50,000 in the denominator. And you want that ratio to be 30% or higher. So if you figure out your solvency and you say, oh, I'm 35%, that means you're doing really well at making sure you can afford and service your debt repayment. If you're less than 30%, you need to increase your revenue. Increasing your revenue will also increase your profit and give you the cash flow to pay down that debt, solving both parts of that fraction. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that limits people on their growth when they don't leverage debt like that?
Absolutely. Do I think do I think somebody can still grow? Yes. Do I think it's going to take them longer? Yes. Do I think it could have a harmful impact to their cash flow if they don't use debt? Yes.
That's it's, and the way you explained it of kind of pre-planning to have it available rather than try to use it in like an emergency is great advice for a lot of things. Like similarly, like I usually try to plan ahead of like we have had not a high churn rate, but when we've had installers leave unexpectedly, it sometimes it's hard to replace them. And when we're not planning ahead for having X amount of resumes or people in the pipeline of potential hires, it's detrimental, because then we have to just bring on the first warm body we see, because we need to have somebody in the shop doing the installs, kind of a thing. So having pre-planned finances at access to line of credit when you don't need it is a lot safer and better than to be scrambling for I need to make a new hire, I need to buy this equipment, I got to go get the highest interest rate possible.
Yeah. You're buying yourself the opportunity to make a long-term solution rather than always having to do short-term solutions that you're just kind of on the hamster wheel.
Awesome. Let's see. What actually, this is a question that I've had for a while, is what got you into financial plan, like the business that you're in now? Like, cause I know you did come from the print industry. How did you get into what you're doing now?
So it found me a little over 10 years ago. I was at college and woke up one day with $1.50 in my bank account. And I call that my come to Jesus moment, because if I did not have that moment, I would not have realized how financially illiterate I was. And so because I was still at UCF and I had just really started my time there, it was early on enough where I could change my degree. And so I decided to study finance, not because I wanted to make a career out of it, but because I wanted to learn a skill set for myself. I felt like I didn't know what I wanted to do after graduation, but I did know that I was going to have to make money to live, and I was going to have to manage that money. And so I wanted to be a good steward of it. What better way to be a good steward than to start with learning more about it? And frankly speaking, it scared the living daylights out of me. I didn't think I was smart enough, but I was. And it wasn't until I graduated, I actually became a financial advisor. Hated it, moved on to mortgage processing, hated that even more. And it wasn't until I was working in the print shop in a financial role, and I was really their CFO without getting the title or the pay for it, but I was doing all of the work that a CFO would in that print shop, that I realized, oh, I like this. There's something about this. And I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but I took that experience. I then helped my friend who was opening up a gym. I did the same thing with him and then some. I was admin and everything else outside of personal training. And then that was around the time that I had actually started Mills Knows Bills. And so Mills Knows Bills started as a YouTube channel, morphed into a consulting company that then morphed into a done-for-you financial service that then got rebranded as Fractional CFO Services. So it's been this natural progression for about 7 years or so now.
Yeah, the fractional CFO thing, and I've only been in business, I feel like in business for the last maybe 5 years or so, but that to me seems like a newish term. Like, has fractional CFO always been a thing, or has it just become a more recent?
It's been around. It's definitely become a lot more popular recently,
Mm-hmm.
more talked about. There's been a lot of other fractional roles that come up too. Like I've even heard of a fractional CEO and a fractional CSO. And, there's more fractionals out there. But yeah, I think the interesting part was I was doing fractional CFO work for about 4 years within my company. Frankly, I didn't even know that was a phrase. I was just providing a service and helping my clients that were graduating from my consulting program that didn't want to actually implement the plan. So that's what I mean when I say it found me. It really was birthed out of demand for my audience.
That's awesome. What's your future vision for Mills Knows Bills?
We want to become a fintech company. So we are going to be ramping up our client base, which will then afford us the opportunity to bring Joe, my husband, over to the company full time. And he will build out a software that we internally will use to help us be more streamlined and efficient in providing our services to our CFO clients. Once we feel like it is publicly ready, then we'll start selling it to other financial professionals like bookkeepers, fractional CFOs, accountants, basically other people who help business owners, and they want to provide a service through the use of our software. And then step 3 is make it user-friendly for the everyday business owner. So have a light version of it where they can do it themselves. Once we get to a certain number of subscribers, we would love the opportunity to sell it.
Nice. That is a big vision. That's cool.
It is big. And
how have your new mom, how has balancing growing Mills Knows Bills and raising your little one, like how has that been over the last, how old is?
Yeah. So I have 2 kids. I have a boy who's 2 years old, and then I have a girl who is actually 11 months today. And so
sorry, not new mom. You have a 2-year-old, and then you're. It
definitely feels like a new mom. Listen, I blinked and it's been 2 years, so I get it.
Yeah.
I would say that with my son, it was a lot harder of a balance because if you looked at where my business was at that point, more than half of my business was on the consulting side, whereas I had a few CFO clients at that point. And so there were a couple factors that made that transition more difficult. One of which was the emotional energy that's required from the consulting/coaching side. Those were businesses that needed a little bit more of the hand holding, whereas I was depleted every day. Whereas on the CFO side, it was more of me just doing the data crunching and having set meetings with my clients. It was a little bit more structured. Over here, I had no idea what was going to happen and when. Not to mention, this was consistent monthly recurring revenue. This was churn and burn, right? And so it was very difficult for me to make that transition because I felt like I was always operating in a fight or flight mode. Whereas with my daughter, I had no coaching clients. I had actually already completely rebranded to only doing CFO services months before she was born. And so even though it was still me, myself, and I doing all of the services and being client facing when she was born, there was a lot less stress because of the emotional toll, the monthly recurring revenue. I didn't have to, my schedule was more structured too. And so that transition was a whole lot easier. And so moving forward, when we want to have baby number 3, I'm excited because now I have a team that can handle a lot of the work that I did even with my baby girl. And so it's been a learning experience every time. I think the biggest thing that I've tried to take away from it is to give myself grace. I'm very structured and I have these high expectations, but understanding that, sometimes God's expectations are far better than mine and being okay with letting go in some areas.
That's great. I like that you said that now that you have your team, it'll be a whole different ballgame with when you have the 3rd baby, because that's been a really great reward of the last few years for our business of is having a team in place that can continue to operate the business where I don't have to be in the office, in the shop, doing everything myself, when the team can take care of it and they're happy to do it because, we pay well, we take care of them.
I love that.
And I get to spend time with my family. I don't miss sports games. There's, costume parade at the school. I'm there. Like I want to support my kids and do everything I can. At least some of the costume parades. I have missed a couple.
Did I see on Instagram you dressed up as the Grinch recently?
Yeah, I moonlight as a Christmas Grinch for parties occasionally.
I found your next business model.
Actually, this is funny. After a Christmas party that we went to, and I was the Grinch there. I had the Grinch costume on, and it was with my son. We went to McDonald's to get food at McDonald's.
No, you didn't.
And I had the Grinch costume on, and I went through the drive-through and, excuse me, can I get a cheeseburger? And I went all the way to the window, and they look at me and just like, oh my God, it was so funny.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is next time you do that, you should go into the store and you should make sure it's recorded because that sounds amazing.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get some Grinch content this
I love
this
it.
Christmas for sure.
That's good. That's good. Do you have any other questions for me?
Gosh, let's see. Okay, last question. Where do you think a business like, so let's say for my Wrap Shop Academy, okay, most of the businesses that we work with are wrap shops that are in the beginning phases of trying to hire, like they have their technician role and their business owners that are doing everything themselves. A really hard part for them is getting that first hire and always feeling like they can't afford it. I can't afford a hire. What advice would you give them or somebody in that kind of position where I'm doing everything and I'm barely making enough? How can I afford to hire anybody to bring into my business? What advice would you give to them?
You can't afford to not hire somebody. If you want to scale and grow and get to the point where you want to own a business, not a job, you need to take that plunge at one point. And so my advice would be looking at all the tasks that you do, what's a role that you could hire for that's going to eliminate as many of those tasks as possible, freeing up as much of your time as possible, allowing you to bring in more revenue to more than replace the cost of that hire. And more often than not, the first hire is an admin. You need somebody to help take off all of the nitty-gritty pieces of your business, keep you organized, keep things moving forward, responding to those quotes. So that way you can actually bring in more business, right? And so you're going to have to take the plunge. If you're in a financial position where you can set aside 3 months of that person's pay before bringing them on, so that way you build up a buffer of 90 days of pay for them to give you that time to transition, go for it. If not, look at things like financing, but make sure you have a timeline of when you are expecting to recoup that money and start seeing an investment on that money as well.
That's great. Yeah. And it has to start somewhere. I mean, it's hard. You have to take the leap. You know, I told our group, our boot camp group that building a business is in a way a little bit like scaling a really scary wall, like rock climbing. And with each progression, with each hire that you make, you're able, you're climbing this scary wall, trying to build the business, trying to get more jobs, get more sales, get more everything. And you're grabbing footholds and handholds, and you get a little bit higher, and so you're getting farther and farther away from the anchor that you placed way down at the bottom.
Yep.
And when you make your first hire, that's like your first anchor the next anchor that you anchor yourself in, and when they help your business start to feel more stable and you're good, then now all of a sudden you have that admin that can help you send out quotes and send out emails and keep you organized. Now the growth of your business has a new anchor. Now you can scale and climb a little bit higher until the next hire, and that's your next anchor. And it's those in betweens, those hires that I feel like are the scariest part. But as soon as you actually do it and you place that anchor, you make that hire, then the relief of having that help of the right person in the right role helps you get to the next level. And it's not going to never not be scary. Like you just keep climbing that wall, but finding that next anchor, the next hire, is pretty important.
Yeah. I mean, it's still scary for me, I'm assuming it's still scary for you. It's just, it is what it is. When you're wanting to continue growing, you're going to have to step into something that you don't know. But I love that analogy. I'm really excited to see the content pieces that are taken out of that analogy. I can already see that Miller's thinking through some things, but thank you for joining me today. I've really loved our conversations and getting to know you a little bit better. If you did not go back and listen to that episode with Dan, now's your opportunity to listen to last week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.